All right, welcome everybody. This is the few hours before we are wrapping up DPS 2020. So another 15 hours of content to go and great content lined up until the end of the event. And now we have Tom Martens with us, who is a lead expert with Be Intelligent. His topic is DAX, time series analysis, sequences, and some other fancy stuff. Thanks, Tom, for joining. This is a live session, friends. It's streaming live into the platform you're watching. Use the Q&A window, the chat window to ask questions. And I am going to moderate this and take your questions to Tom. Over to you, Tom. Take it away.
Okay. Thanks for joining this session. It's about DAX. It's about time series analysis. It's maybe a little bit more sophisticated DAX than just a simple sum or just a simple year-to-date DAX. So that hopefully you will have some fun as I did. And now first some slides before we go into more detailed DAX, and it's almost, the whole session is almost about demoing DAX and what can be achieved using DAX in regards to time series analysis. About me, almost 25 or 20 plus years of focusing on Microsoft Data Platform, delivering, building, creating analytical solutions. Started with simple things like data warehousing, analysis services, and now I'm almost focusing on DAX, on Power BI. I did some contributions to the Microsoft community or Power BI platform that earned me the MVP award a couple of years ago. And I also have written a book about DAX. So let's say I love using DAX. So time series analysis is, maybe you are familiar with time series analysis. If you have a background in machine learning, then you know what time series is. If you are not that familiar with time series, it's simple. We are collecting all the time observation of defined data, well-defined data items obtained through repeated measurements over time. So basically, this is what we are doing all the time if we are collecting data. Each order, for example, in a sales process reflects an event. This event has some kind of timestamp. This timestamp is used to do similar stuff like simple stuff like measuring the sales of the month, of the year, compare this to the previous months and things like that. Time series analysis is a little bit more than that. And here are some links on the screen where you can get started if you're not that familiar with time series analysis. As I already mentioned, time series analysis can be used to better understand what's happened in the past and also to predict the future. This is an advanced session, but it's still an introduction into time series analysis, advanced because of the usage of DAX. Introduction because I just want to make you aware that it's possible to do more than just the sales over sales, month over month comparison using DAX. Why do I use DAX? DAX is fun, at least most of the time. And there are a lot of business analysts that are more fluently speaking DAX than Python or R. Time series analysis is very well used in the Python and R community, but not that much used until now in the DAX community. So because of the limited ingestion possibilities of Python and R scripts in the Power BI world, maybe just it's just possible to use this more doing scripting visuals. So this is why I decided to create, let's say, DAX to make this more available. And of course, it's also had been a requirement from my current customer. So before we start with DAX, here's a little slide that makes this time series and how I accomplish things by this little chart. So I want to have, I want to show the previous value. I want to identify gaps. Gaps means, okay, there's some kind of ordering from a specific customer, the 1st of January, then the 7th of January, followed by the 8th, and then just the 5th of February. So this means if this is the complete sequence of ordering events, there are, for example, 2 gaps. Between the 1st and the 7th and the 8th of January and the 5th of February, there's a gap. These gaps have different lengths, and maybe if I know how long the gaps are on average, I can predict and provide insights to become more to return or provide actionable insights. If I know what will happen next, maybe this is already possible by knowing that this customer is overdue because his average gaps have been just 2 days and now he's already on the 5th day, lacking gaps, lacking ordering. So now I go to my first Power BI file. I try to. And now my first Power BI file. Here we go. Most of, or let's say all the available DAX statements that you will see or will also see in the Power BI X files or PBIX files made available by this session. There's a starting point, and this starting point is, let's say, or I call it the previous value problem. The previous value does not mean yesterday, but it means find the previous value, and this previous value is from the point of view of the 7th of January, it's the 1st of January. The previous value of the 5th of February is the 8th of January. And so this comparison, meaning what is the previous value or my current value here in this simple example, what is the previous value in regards of the 7th? It's 1. And what is the previous value from the point of view of the 5th of February? It's 32. This can become quite, let's say, difficult using maybe the obvious DAX solution. And this is based on this DAX statement here that has the idea to is find the value. In this case, it's the measure expression quantity that I want to find. I'm using the last non-blank value function that returns this measure for the last available date, or the most current date, or the date that is smaller. To be more precise, the max date that is smaller than the current date. So for this reason, I have to use calculate to alter the existing filter context. And this is, as we can see, it's working because this function returns the expected values. So I go to a little bit more complex scenario. Basically, it's the same with just a much more larger data set. So this data set is using the control the retail data warehouse SQL Server sample database. There are millions of records inside a specific fact table that I'm using. For this reason, I'm always using this larger data set because it helps to check if the current DAX statement that I build on a really, really small data set to validate the logic inside this statement. Then
Tom, it will
yes.
be good if you can zoom in a bit. Some attendees are requesting a bit of zoom in. Yeah, that'll be great. Thank you.
Sorry for that. Please excuse me. So if I'm tasked with or designing or developing a more complex DAX statement, my first approach is, of course, try to understand the business requirement. Then I try to reduce the existing data set to a minimum, just to being able to understand the logic I implemented, just to make sure that it's returning the expected result. After that, I switch to a larger data set, checking if the performance is still that what I'm expecting or what we are expecting from the Power BI tabular data model, the in-memory columnar database that is inside Power BI. So, and now here's a simple approach. What's a very, very simple report. And this is also something that I learned is don't create the most complex reports, because this is, I create the final reports that the clients need, the users want to have, when I'm 100% sure that my DAX statements are correct. Until then, I use just a table visual, a matrix visual, and also a card visual to make sure that both of these visual types in combination with some slicers are returning the expected results. So this is just simply explains this, how you can use the available DAX statements inside this PBIX file. And the available DAX statements are currently classified or grouped. There's one with an error inside this display folders called TSA, the abbreviation for time series. Once again, forget to zoom, sorry. Hopefully this works. TSA, time series analysis, there's some kind of previous value, then there are gaps. And of course, this is the opposite aspect of gaps, it's sequences. So as I want to know, I want to know how many gaps are on average in, let's say, some kind of behavior for ordering products. But I also sometimes want to know what is the average of events that are consecutive, meaning each day after day or months after months without having some kind of gap. So let's say, what is the salesperson, the most successful salesperson who has been closed some deals on the last 10 months in order, is something different than who has, what is the most successful salesperson that closed 10 orders inside the whole year. And for this reason, and now it's possible, or just simply possible, to add this one here to my matrix or table visual. And this one is the one that I call the naive approach. It's because it's using the last known value thing and then using calculate to alter the existing filter context, because I want to find the most recent sales value before the 4th of April, 4th of January, sorry. So, and this can become, this DAX statement, may be obvious to solve this, can become quite slow if I'm using this on a really large data set where, for example, my months, a lot of customer, because I want to find this for all the customers, because my question is, what is the gap, average gap between all customers to make my decisions? What is the customer with the most or the longest sequence of consecutive events and things like that? Then suddenly the DAX statements that are being generated can become quite slow. And for this reason, I came up with a slightly different approach for, or let's say it's not slightly different, it's completely different. Just showing the may be obvious. It's about this last non-blank value function, then using wraparound calculate and altering the existing filter context. So this is maybe the obvious approach to solve this previous value question, but this can become quite slow. And for this reason, I use a much more complex DAX statement. This is why the subtitle of this session, Fancy DAX, because I'm using certain patterns, and these are the patterns that I will now explain in more detail. Here, one of my favorite function has become all things paths. Maybe you are using paths to traverse a hierarchy inside chart of accounts. For some reason, I do not have such often these chart of accounts unbalanced hierarchies. I use paths and everything and all these path functions for creating and traversing an ordered object. And this is maybe a shortcoming, let's say it this way, of DAX, or better the tabular model, that there is no kind of index that allows me to order my table structure, as we are familiar with ordering structures inside SQL databases. So for this reason, I use to create an ordered structure, I use concatenate, that allows me to concatenate all the dates that I found. I'm ordering this dates by the date key and choose ascending order. And as concatenate is one of the table iterator functions that creates a string, I'm using the pipe sign as a separator. The pipe sign is very important because the pipe sign is something that allows, or that Power BI is, or the DAX is using to traverse something that is a path. So each item, in this case a date key, is separated by the pipe sign, makes it possible to use my other path functions, for example, like path length in line 20. There I'm using path length, and now I'm able to define or determine the length of the path, meaning how many items does this path, this string, to being precise, consist of. So then I do some kind of sanity check, because I just want to make sure that my path at least has one date. So then I create in line 2020, I create a virtual table that I tend to call, for whatever reason, ABT, as I have some kind of R background And in R, this ABT stands for analytical base table, because I'm using this base table for all the things to come. As I have now, I have all the items from the fact, the dates from the fact table where an event happened. I'm using one of the most powerful functions, generate series, where I'm creating a table with as many rows as the path is long, and starting with row 1 and incrementing with 1 is the third parameter of generate series. Then I'm adding date index as a column and use pass item in line 26 to return the date for the first row, for the second row, etc. And now it's quite simple to define, just by using pass item, the value function or referencing the value function, value column that is automatically generated whenever we are using generate series, to simply subtract -1, and then I'm automatically at the previous value. So this allows me, leveraging the ordered path, to easily detect, find, determine the previous sales event. So for this reason, I'm using pass item once again in line 27, determine the date index, and then I can create something, the previous value, simple as that. By in line 29, I define or add another column, previous value, and in 32, I'm using calculate to determine the previous value by just referencing the date index previous. So this is quite simple. Let's say this is DAX in a way how I would. So this is, I had the idea to try this out because this is how I would solve this in SQL in a certain way. Creating a table that contains all the sales events. Then I'm looking for something that is ordered. I'm using generate series to create something that has an index, even it's not an index, it's just an integer column. And then I have my previous value and things like that. And now I just want to make sure, or now I have my previous value, and this previous value works quite well if I'm adding this function. Should work quite well. Here, for example, to find the previous value. And this is really, really fast, by magnitudes faster than using the last non-blank approach and calculate and filter. This is, maybe this is not apparent, but because this DAX is much, much longer than the previous one. And there's another, let's say, a different approach. that, oh, sorry, wrong hotkey. And now I have a base table, ABT, that contains all the records. But now I want to find I need to find just one date that contains the previous value. And this is done basically by, instead of filtering this analytical base table, I use an inner join. Because now I'm able to find, I'm offloading much of the intellectual challenges to the DAX engine, the Vertipack engine, by using a simple inner join between the first table that now contains the date values and my analytical base table. And this is also, or both of these approaches are much more by magnitudes faster than using this last non-blank value. So I first started with my time series analysis by solving this previous value thing. And this approach then will be really, really helpful and beneficial by, I'll go back to my presentation. Once again, wrong hotkey. So once again, this is my analytical base table. The column value is generated, or is this value column generated automatically by using generate series. And the event date index is the first item of the path I created using concatenate X with a pipe sign as a delimiter. The next, the previous event date is simply the same, but just subtracting one minus one from the value, so that I get the first, the previous item from the past. Next event is what is the following event, just by adding one instead of adding one to the value, meaning I can create, change the pointer to the path variable. Consecutive is just some kind of logic that allows to, is there an immediate event happening? And here I can say, okay, what is the start of the gap and what is the end of the gap? So because, what does this mean? Because the event date is 43831, meaning, and the next is 43837, sorry, meaning the gap is from 32 to 36. And this is, there are 5 days missing. And this is something where I also create this sequence. And then I'm also considering what is a sequence. So for this reason, I do not determine the first, just as I consider this a single event. for this reason, the sequence start is empty for the first event, and then there is a sequence end date where I can use this for the sequence question. And all of this is my analytical base table that then can be used, or I reuse this for a lot of different problems, creating this kind of virtual table. Going back to my Contoso retail sample PBIX that has here a lot of more all the measures are classified in this display folder, so it should be easy to use this PBIX as you like, and maybe as also adopt the measure for your needs. And if you are working on such kinds of thing, it's always a good idea to get familiar, if you're not already are familiar with DAX Studio, because DAX Studio helps you a lot to optimize your DAX statements. For this reason, as I'm using this DAX statement in a second, this report in a second, I remove this statement. Now it just contains the basic total sales amount. I'm going back to the blank page. It's always a good idea to start, if you are using, or if you're tasked with optimizing DAX statements, it's always a good idea to have a blank statement, a blank report page in your PBIX file, because this will allow you to open the report without any DAX executing. So for this reason, I save this file as it is now with this active page. Reopening the file in a second. If I find it, I'm sorry. So it's opening. Sorry, it should open much faster. So here we are, starting with the almost blank page. This is just a simple text. Then I'm also opening DAX Studio. DAX Studio is available for download for free. It's developed by Darren Gospel and very much designed by the guys from SQL BI, Marco Rosso and Alberto Ferrari. Now I want to connect second, close it once again. So, and either I'm using DAX Studio outside of Power BI desktop or inside. DAX Studio is one of the tools that is supported, natively supported as an external tool next to the tabular editor and the ALM toolkit. If I'm starting DAX Studio outside, then I get asked to connect to a tabular server or to Power BI desktop. Basically, it's the same. Now I am not connected. I'm sorry for that. This was my smaller data model. Next. So now I'm using DAX Studio from inside of Power BI to make sure that I do not once again connect with the wrong data model. And here I can see all queries. This is one of the traces, query plan, server timings. I use first get, trace all the queries that are issued by the connected data model, the Power BI the data model or the data engine inside the tabular model inside my Power BI desktop file. Query trace has started. Going back to my Power BI X file. Now, if I'm moving from the blank page to the page of interest, some DAX statements are generated because it's I just opened this PBX file. This is already traced by DAX Studio. If I'm going here for the all queries, there's the duration 44 milliseconds, and this, if I double click this query, I can see what Power BI desktop has been generated and is executed. But this is, everything is fine because it's 44 milliseconds. Here, these other two queries are created because of my slicer. Now, if I'm going back to this, and now I'm adding my measure of interest, where I want to know if it's fast or if it's slow, I can use my previous value, this sum x. This was really, really stupid because I did not mark the proper visual where I want to add it. So now this one here has been a little bit flawed, the overall experience, because this was the single column, and now this 500 milliseconds are using this last value for really a lot of single transactions for each customer inside each month. And the overall result is, or the the duration for this final query is 500 milliseconds. So this is next to what is happening. It's really fast. I want to spare you the experience restarting everything and then using this not so fast value, depending on your machine, this value this measure creating the same values that as the some X value here is almost about 25-30 seconds on my machine, and maybe it's faster on yours, but the comparison is what matters. It's about 500 milliseconds versus 25 seconds. But I want to spare this, spare you this experience. And here are a lot of pre-calculated or predefined measures available. Something that is counting the number of gaps, for example, inside a month for a given customer. So this then allows me to use or determine some KPIs. What is the average number of gaps? What is the largest gap? There are also some kind of a measure that starts recounting sequences. And this is, for example, shown here. Here's a single, I choose a single company and used this measure, this sequence index. And as one can see here, somewhere, I'm in May, and in May, it seems to be that there are two sequences. The first is starting on the 14th of May and runs until the 22nd. And then in May, there's another sequence meaning longer than just one event. So basically, I consider something a sequence in this example if there are more than two events. And basically this measure, sequence index, is using, let's say, the same approach, a little bit same but different. Here I have in line 19, there is my concatenate X using the pipe sign that creates a path length, generate series. I use generate series to span a table, a virtual table inside my DAX statement that has a row number starting with 1 that I can then use to simply navigate from a current to the previous one and things like that. So for this reason, oops, I'm sorry. It looks similar as this one. So basically it's using the same different techniques that I introduced a little bit more detail inside the explaining the previous measure problem. And this sorry, with this, coming back to my slide. And so gaps, this has been the demo, and I'm done.
Well then, Toms, thank you very much for being with us today.
Cool. You're welcome. It has been a pleasure.
Likewise. Have a good day. Bye.
Bye.